Hi, my name is Christina Strickland. I'm the managing partner of Rally Wealth and Benefits. Is $5 million going to be enough to retire? It might be, but it could also be too much. Let's look at what goes into retirement projections and how we determine how much you actually need in retirement. If you've been through a financial planning exercise, you've probably come across the question, how much do I need in retirement? And so one of the things that I want to do today is talk through the different sources or different data points we use and kind of determine how much is enough. So I get asked that all the time, hey, I've got $5 million. Is that going to be enough to retire? Is my goal to get to 2 million? Is my goal to get to 10 million? People ask these questions all the time. One of the things I think we need to consider though is that answer is totally different for everyone. Not only is the answer different for everyone, but that same person could ask 20 different people and get 20 different answers. So here's my 2 cents and how I think it should work and how much you actually need for retirement. You're gonna obviously take how much do you spend each month right now. Right now I spend, let's just say $7,500 a month. Got 3 kids, so soccer, gymnastics, baseball, cello, whatever's going into that. Got housing payments, I have pets, I have vet bills, utilities, gas, groceries, insurance, all of those things, right? So start with what's your dollar amount today, and then are any of those things gonna go away? So the most common one is people say they're gonna pay their house off either right before they retire or within the first several years of retirement. Big thing I see people miss there is that they'll give themselves credit for the entire mortgage. But if your mortgage includes taxes and insurance, that's still gonna occur in retirement. So just take off the principal and interest part. You're still gonna owe taxes and insurance on your house. So what are the expenses today? What are the expenses that are going away? But then also, what are the random things that you don't think about? So am I gonna need a new car? How often do I typically buy a new car? What happens when that car needs new brakes or new tires, or in my case, a new transmission, which is not very fun, but it's part of life. Home improvements, am I gonna have to replace my roof? Am I, by the time I retire, let's say I retire at 65, but maybe I built my house when I was like 40. So by the time I retire at 65, my kitchen's 25 years old, and that can be great, and that can be the best kitchen ever, and you might do it for the rest of your life. But you may say, hey, if I bought this house at 40, I'm 65, maybe I want to redo my kitchen when I'm 75. So things like that we need to factor in. We also need to think about long-term care. We need to think about inflation. We need to think about holidays, gifting, travel. We need to think about all the things. And so what I say when you're determining how much you actually need, let's look at a full 12 months of spending. What did you spend for an entire year? Because here's what happens in a year. All the holidays happen in a year. All the birthdays happen in a year. Typically, travel is yearly. So things like that will be encompassed in that picture. Then think through the more often or less often, than a year. The cars. Hopefully we're not buying a new car every year, right? But you may be buying a new car every 10 years. So think through those things. Then what you also need to do is apply inflation to it. Then we need to think through what's the income that I know that I have. So for example, I know I have Social Security. I know my partner has Social Security. Maybe I own a rental house, or maybe I have a business I'm gonna sell. So those are the cash flow that I know is coming in. Then there's probably a gap, right? So let's take, for example, let's say that I need $8,000 a month in retirement. And maybe between my Social Security and my partner's Social Security, I know that I have $5,000 coming in. Well, 1, I had to pay taxes on that. And 2, Medicare Part B is coming out of that as well. So what am I actually netting? Maybe I'm netting $4,000 a month after taxes and Medicare. So I need $8,000 a month. I have $4,000 coming in from Social Security. I need another $4,000 from somewhere. And that's when you kind of look at your portfolio of, hey, I need $4,000 a month. That's $48,000 a year, but then there's gonna be inflation also. And so, and hopefully I'm gonna live for 30 years in retirement. Well, that number, if I need $4,000 more a month, that's $48,000 a year. Let's round it up to 50,000 because 50,000 is a round number. And maybe every 10 years, I need another 50,000 to buy a car. So I've got 150,000 in car throughout my retirement, and I have 50,000 a year. If I live for 30 years, you can see that that becomes a pretty big number very quickly. That's 1.5 million just in today's dollars, not even including inflation. And then I have another 150 worth of cars. That's $1,650,000 in today's numbers. I have to add inflation. And then I need to look at my portfolio and say, what in my portfolio is gonna get me that? And again, there's no guarantee, right? But you should assume an assumed growth rate. A lot of our projections, and when I like to do plans for clients, I like to be super, super conservative. I think the most projections I look at are somewhere between 3 to 6% annually. Now, that's not a guarantee that we're going to get those returns, but it's an assumption based on historical data. The system we use is called Money Guide Pro. It bases the projections based on how you're currently invested. And here's the thing, it's a range, right? There will be some years where there will be maybe international conflict or reasons that the economy doesn't do as well, and you may be negative. There should be, hopefully, years where maybe it does better. But on average, I like to look at projections that assume 3 to 6%, because here's the thing, when you're determining how much do you actually need, what's that number, and you think to yourself, I need $1 million, I need $2 million, I need $10 million, somewhere in between, please don't make that assumption based on a growth rate that's unattainable. And so I met with a prospect the other day who is working with a different advisor who told her how much she needed in retirement, but the entire thing hinged on 9% a year rate of return. And maybe she'll get that, maybe, but what I would hate to think about is what happens if you don't? I'd much rather your projection be based on a more conservative approach, because again, I'd rather assume 3 to 6% a year conservatively, and maybe you'll do better. I'd rather that than assume 9% a year and then very quickly figure out that your plan isn't going to work. So how much you need is very, very personal. What do you spend? What are your habits? And then based on that, how do you adjust your portfolio accordingly? Because what could also happen is you could need to adjust your risk level. You might be so aggressive that your portfolio is more volatile because you're aggressive, and maybe a bad year could mess up your projections. So the long and short of it is no one has a one-size-fits-all answer. And if they tell you a one-size-fits-all answer, run for the hills, because no one can answer that question until they know you, and they know your spending habits, and they know your investing habits. And if you don't know that and you need to walk through it, let us know. We'd be more than happy to help you. And if we need to make any tweaks, we can walk through what does it look like to make some changes, because at the end of the day, how much you need in retirement is personal to you specifically, and really no one else can answer that for you, but they can help you. We'd be more than happy to walk alongside you as you make that journey and as you work through your retirement projections.